Have you ever loved someone so much that you didn't realize they were stealing your life piece by piece? Today's story is about two sisters, identical twins, who shared everything until one decided she wanted it all. But what do you do when the person who ruins your life has your exact same face? Drop a comment below if you've ever had to cut off a toxic person in your own life. This is The Shadow and the Sun. Get comfortable. Let's get into it. They say twins are a soul split in two, but they never tell you what happens when one half decides to consume the other. Iris and I shared a womb, a face, and a name. But while I was born with a compass in my hand, Iris was born with a mirror. Since we were children, the dynamic was absolute. I was the architect of our world, and she was the curator of the credit. I would spend hours in the dirt, building intricate cities out of twigs and river stones, obsessing over the structural integrity of a leaf roof. Iris would wait until the final stone was placed, then invite our parents over, her small hand sweeping across my work. "Look what I made," she would whisper. And I, fueled by a quiet, desperate love, let her. I was the sun, burning, creating, fueling the growth. She was the moon, cold, dead, and only visible when she reflected my light. 20 years later, the stakes had changed, but the theft remained the same. The Zenith waterfront was to be my magnum opus. A $3 billion tech district that would breathe with the tides of the Pacific. I spent 18 months in a self-imposed exile. My apartment became a cathedral of vellum and blue light filters. I didn't just design buildings, I designed an ecosystem. I calculated the wind shear variables for glass towers that curved like sails. I mapped the subterranean irrigation systems that used desalinated seawater to cool the server farms. By the 18th month, I was a hollowed-out version of myself. My fingers were stained with ink that wouldn't wash off. I smelled of stale coffee and the ozone of a motherboard running at redline. I had the physical blueprints, 6 massive hand-inked scrolls, and the master drive. The presentation was scheduled for 8 a.m. the next morning. Iris came over at midnight. She brought a tin of expensive Earl Grey and a look of sisterly concern that I was too exhausted to see through. "You're trembling, Maya," she said, her voice like silk over a blade. "Drink. You need to sleep for at least 4 hours or you'll collapse in front of the board." The tea was hot. It smelled of bergamot and something else, something faint and metallic, like a copper penny hidden in a fistful of herbs. "To your legacy," she whispered. I took 3 sips. Within 5 minutes, the room began to tilt. The blueprints on my wall didn't just blur, they seemed to melt, the black lines running like tears down the white paper. My tongue felt like a heavy, salted slug in my mouth. I tried to stand, but my legs were no longer mine. They were pillars of sand, crumbling under the weight of my own body. I lay there, paralyzed, my cheek pressed against the cold grain of the floor. I watched as Iris's heels, sharp, predatory stilettos, clicked toward my desk. I couldn't blink, I couldn't scream. I could only watch through the haze as she rolled my 18 months of life into a leather tube. I watched her slender fingers pluck the master drive from the port. She knelt beside me. She didn't look angry. She looked satisfied, the way a predator looks when the prey finally stops twitching. "You always were the talented one, Maya," she murmured, brushing a stray hair from my forehead with terrifying tenderness. "But talent is a raw material. It needs a salesman. You've done the work. Now I'll take the stage. Go to sleep. When you wake up, you'll be the sister who had a nervous breakdown and lost the firm's future, and I'll be the savior." The next morning, I was found by my landlord. By then, Iris had already finished the presentation. The board had given her a standing ovation. When I showed up at the office, disheveled, vibrating with residual toxins, screaming about drugged tea, they didn't see a victim. They saw a genius who had finally snapped under the pressure. I was fired for gross negligence. The Zenith became the Iris Vein District. I didn't stay to fight. You cannot fight a shadow when everyone believes the shadow is the one casting the light. I left the city. I changed my name to M.N. Sterling. I moved to a town where the air tasted of salt, and the people didn't read architectural digests. I started over in a garage. No staff, no high-end rendering software, just a drafting table and the fury that lived in my marrow. For 3 years, I built. Small projects first. Private villas, boutique libraries, each one a masterpiece of hidden engineering. I became a ghost in the industry. Sterling was the name whispered by the elite when they wanted the impossible. I didn't want fame. I wanted a foundation. Meanwhile, back in the city, the moon was beginning to wane. Iris had the blueprints, but she didn't have the mind that conceived them. When the contractors asked about the load-bearing tolerances of the glass atrium, she stuttered. When the soil samples came back showing high acidity, she didn't know how to adjust the concrete chemistry. The Zenith District was failing. Costs tripled. The ecosystem was a stagnant mess of flooded basements and cracked facades. Iris was facing 3 counts of fraud and a bankruptcy that would bury her name forever. She needed a miracle. She needed the investor. The Grand Arch Gala. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and desperation. Iris stood by the bar, her dress a shimmering silver, but her skin was sallow. She was scanning the room for the guest of honor, the mysterious billionaire head of Elysian Holdings who had been buying up the city's distressed assets. I watched her from the balcony. I wore black. No shimmer. No reflection. Just the void. I descended the stairs slowly. Every eye in the room turned. Not because I looked like Iris, though our faces were still identical, but because I carried a gravity she could never simulate. Iris froze. Her glass of champagne trembled, the liquid sloshing against the rim. "Maya," she hissed, her voice cracking. I didn't stop. I walked past her, my shoulder brushing hers, as if she were nothing more than a pillar in a hallway. "Mr. Sterling," the city mayor beamed, stepping forward to take my hand. "The woman of the hour. Have you looked at the Zenith proposal?" I turned then. I looked at Iris. For the first time in our lives, she didn't look like my sister. She looked like a blueprint with the ink washed away. Empty. "I've looked at the Zenith District," I said, my voice projected, calm and lethal. "It's a magnificent design, truly. But it's been neglected." The person who presented it didn't seem to understand that the foundation wasn't built for the weight of a lie. Iris stepped forward, her face contorting. "Maya, wait! We can talk about this! The firm, it's our legacy!" No, Iris, I said, leaning in so only she could hear the ice in my words. It was my labor. It was your theft, and now it's my acquisition. I pulled a document from my clutch. I've just purchased the debt of the Zenith project. As of 10 minutes ago, Iris, you are no longer the lead architect. You aren't even an employee. You are a trespasser in a house I built. I turned back to the mayor, leaving her standing there in the center of the room. The cameras flashed, but for once, they weren't for her. She stood in the middle of the gala, surrounded by people, yet she had never been more invisible. The sun had finally come out, and the shadow had nowhere left to hide. The sun finally came out, and the shadow had nowhere left to hide. What a beautifully calculated ending. If this story gave you goosebumps, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We have some incredible high-stakes stories and thrilling dramas cooking up right now that you won't want to miss. Thank you for listening today. Protect your light, and I'll see you in the next story.